Welcome back to World According to Briggs. Today we're diving into dangerous small towns in America. Places with high violent crime rates, tiny populations, and news reports that don't make sense until you look closer. These aren't big cities with millions of people and nightly news crews. These are small towns with assaults, robberies, and violent crime rates that sometimes beat major metro areas. Using FBI reported statistics and local trends, we're breaking down why these small towns are so dangerous, what's driving the violence, and why living in these small towns doesn't always mean living safer. If you're researching dangerous places to live, you're in the right place. Let's take a look. Number 10, Pittsburgh, Kansas. Yes, before you object, Pittsburgh technically comes in just above the small town cutoff of 20,000 residents, and its crime profile is a statistically rich case study. Data shows a violent crime rate of about 31.5% higher than the national average. And it pushes total crime rate well above the typical small town figures. What makes Pittsburgh so strange is it defies most of the rules of what a bad town should be. It's home to Pittsburgh State University, which brings in youth and energy, but also a nightlife that sometimes slides into mischief and violence. Combine that student demographic with an economy that struggles to recover from post-industrial shifts, and you've got a town where property, alcohol, and insufficient law enforcement resources converge. Residents often report a sharp contrast between the downtown hustle near campus and the outlying neighborhoods, where the crime is less visible but still statistically relevant. Assaults, robberies, and vehicle theft are all part of the mix. Even though the overall crime rate has dipped slightly in recent years, the per capita violence remains stubbornly high compared to other towns its size. Pittsburgh, Kansas sees about 486 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents. Number 9, Fairfield, Oklahoma. Fairfield might be small, but its estimated crime profile paints a picture most residents would prefer not to think about. Sort of like your grandpa on the rail at the Spice Gentlemen's Club in Portland, Oregon. The story behind the crime numbers isn't exactly a mystery. It's a classic small town combo platter. Not too many jobs, not too many services, and even fewer reasons to stick around if you're under 30. In Fairfield, the local economy wheezes along. Young people bail the second they get a chance, and what's left is a town frozen in time. Like your grandfather getting a lap dance. When opportunity packs up and leaves, problems don't politely follow it out the door. They linger. And in a place where police coverage is thin and social services are basically a rumor, small arguments have a bad habit of turning into big ones. And that's normally where you find most of the crime in this town, or at least most of the violent crime. Then of course there's the joy of small town privacy, which isn't really a thing. Everyone knows your business before you do. Neighborhood Check reported that 71% of all neighbor-to-neighbor violence has to do with privacy or invasion of privacy. And when you live in a small town, there's a certain amount of privacy that no longer exists. Your neighbor is also your coworker, your cousin, and the person you're actively not speaking to this week. There's nowhere to cool off, nowhere to disappear, and nowhere to avoid the same people who annoy you daily. So yeah, tensions boil over, and you get a higher than average violent crime rate. Now, Fairfield's violence isn't about some non-stop crime wave. It's what happens when economic stress meets zero breathing room and a support system held together with duct tape and crossed fingers. The violent crime rate in Fairfield is 516 for every 100,000 residents. Number 8, Eden, North Carolina. Eden is one of those towns that looks like classic small town America during the day. Old mills, modest houses, mountains sitting quietly in the background. But once the sun goes down, the vibe changes. According to the FBI, Eden's violent crime rate is roughly 45% higher than the national average, and the overall crime rate runs noticeably above what you'd expect for a town this size. A lot of this ties back to the economy. When the manufacturing jobs dried up, parts of Eden kind of followed suit. Higher unemployment and poverty settle in, and those are the exact ingredients that tend to bring on more assaults, robberies, and domestic incidents. Then there's the reputation issue. Eden's crime doesn't always make the evening news. Most of it is personal stuff, bar arguments that spill over into parking lots, disputes between people who know each other that go sideways, and the occasional opportunistic theft. It's not flashy crime, but it shows up in the FBI data, and enough of the locals don't feel comfortable walking alone at night. The violent crime rate in Eden is 538 incidents per 100,000 residents. Number 7, Stillwell, Oklahoma. Stillwell feels like a place where the American dream went on hiatus and never came back. It's tucked away in the Ozark foothills with a population of about 5,000. And if you drive down Main Street, which it's actually called Division here, you look around and think, wow, this place might have been pretty cool back in the 1970s. If you look at Google Street View, that's exactly what this place looks like. I did find one interesting thing. This dude sitting on the sidewalk. I believe that is a Nerf gun on his back there. And if you go to the other view, you could tell he's wearing some kind of reindeer antler thing too. I just want to know what his backstory is. I mean, what happened? How did he get in this situation? This street view was taken in December of 2023, so it's around Christmas. I don't know if he was at a kid's thing. If this man ever sees this video, please email me. Tell me what was happening in this picture. According to the FBI, the total crime here clocks in around 3,900 incidents for every 100,000 residents. That's everything. Someone broke into your car. Someone stole your antlers while you were sleeping on the sidewalk. Whatever. But their total crime rate is roughly 152% above the national average. Violent crime rate is also well above the national average. The causes here are deep-rooted and complex. Stillwell has one of the highest poverty rates in Oklahoma, with economic stagnation and limited employment opportunities. This creates a fertile ground for criminal activity. Residents and law enforcement alike describe it as a place where desperation often turns into violence, from assaults to street-level crime, especially in pockets of town where social services are scarce. This is not some headline-driven, dramatic crime scene, more of a slow creep, one that actually begs serious policy attention. Local lore even veers into the bizarre. A long-standing curfew for minors and occasional historic incidents like pipe bomb detonations add to Stillwell's reputation as a town that has struggled to contain its darker tendencies. Whether it's drug, youth violence, or property crime, the overall atmosphere is one where everyday life feels just a bit more of a struggle than most other American small towns. Stillwell's violent crime rate is 580 incidents for every 100,000 residents. Number 6, Ashlin, Virginia. No, Ashlin isn't a gritty Rust Belt boomtown or an isolated desert outpost. It's a small Virginia town of about 7,800 people that markets itself as quaint and historic. But if you dig into the crime figures from the FBI, you'll find a different side of this so-called center of the universe. Ashlin's violent crime rate is about 66% higher than the national average, and their total crime rate clocks in roughly about 19% above what most Americans experience. Part of the story behind these numbers is how Ashlin straddles the line between small-town charm and suburban spillover. Located along I-95 just north of Richmond, it draws commuters, college students, and visitors alike, which means areas with higher foot traffic, downtown, around the college, and around retail zones, see disproportionate crime activity. Violent offenses in Ashlin are largely assaults rather than homicides. But when you live somewhere with nearly 600 violent crime incidents per 100,000 residents, even non-fatal violence shapes the day-to-day feeling of safety for locals. While some residents say they feel safe on most streets, a significant portion report uneasy about walking alone at night. And that squares with their statistics. And though the Ashlin police force is relatively well staffed for a town its size, year-over-year crime trends show increase in certain categories, an underscoring of how even small communities aren't immune from broader social and economic pressures that drive crime. Now, a lot of their problem is domestic violence. That one you really can't put on the police. That just happens. Educating people on the subject is the best way to combat that or to make sure everyone has jobs. But Ashlin's violent crime rate is 595 incidents for every 100,000 residents. Number 5, Navasota, Texas. Just under 8,000 residents called Navasota home, and despite its small size and rural feel, the violent crime rate here is pretty high, far above most rural peers. In Navasota, economic stagnation, limited youth engagement programs, and spillover from larger nearby cities help explain the crime profile. They're not too far outside of Houston, a little more than halfway between College Station and Houston. Local workshops on community policing and violence prevention have grown in recent years, but the numbers still reflect a community wrestling with persistent issues such as domestic violence, confrontations outside of bars, and opportunistic street crime. For a town where everyone knows everyone, the closeness can sometimes become a pressure cooker, like we've talked about in other small towns. Old disputes simmer longer, and when they boil over, they make national-level crime figures look depressingly local. I went back and was looking at a lot of the news reports of crime in Navasota. A lot of it has to do with domestic violence, but once you get past that, they got a whole lot of people coming up with drugs and guns all at the same time. Back in September, I don't know if this is a violent crime, but I don't think it is, but 30 dogs were rescued from a Navasota home after the city labels the residents uninhabitable. Yeah, unless you own a ranch and you're a dog rancher, you should not have 30 dogs. And one of the guys that was picked up for drugs and guns also had bomb-making materials. Navasota has a violent crime rate of 785 incidents for every 100,000 residents. Number 4, Quero, Texas. Don't let the small size fool you. Quero has a population of under 8,000 people and has one of the highest violent crime rates in its region, clocking in at almost 1,000 incidents for every 100,000 residents. I mean, the first crime that you notice when you talk about Quero is the name of the local high school football team. They're the Gobblers. The Gobblers. That means local cheerleaders and football players, basketball players, baseball players are known as gobblers. But Quero's challenge is that it sits between worlds, too rural for strong law enforcement budgets, but close enough to larger metro areas that criminal activity flows in rather than stays away. For the most part, their crimes here are going to be drug-related and property offenses, but things like domestic disputes often tip into the violence part, and that really jumps up those stats. Sure, they have a couple assaults and fights because someone called somebody a gobbler and they actually weren't a gobbler. Community members often talk about the sense of disconnect between the town's historic charm and its modern safety challenges. On paper, Quero looks like an idyllic small town, but in practice, the crime numbers tell a different story. The overall crime rate in Quero, Texas is 915 incidents for every 100,000 residents. All right, before we go on, how many more on this list do you think are going to be in Texas? Let me know in the comment section below. Number 3, Snyder, Texas. Here's another Texas town under 20,000 that often flies under the radar. Snyder, where you'll find a startling high violent crime rate. It's roughly triple the US average. And for a town this size, that's downright alarming. Snyder is out in the middle of nowhere and you have no reason to go there unless you're dropping someone off, which I did at one point in the 1990s. I left a school while I was in the Army that was in Georgia and driving to Los Angeles. I had no idea this place was a dangerous place back then. I just dropped the dude off, had some Mexican food, and we were on our way. I just remember it being like everywhere was a dusty parking lot. It was the weirdest thing. It's like family members of his, this whole block was like his family. You know, it's like grandmother lived across the street. He lived with his family. His 2 cousins lived in the house next door. His sister lived at the end of the block. It was really weird. But these days in Snyder, the violence is less about organized gangs and more about socioeconomic pressure points. When jobs are scarce and community resources are limited, conflicts that might be resolved quickly elsewhere sometimes escalate into aggravated assaults or worse. Youth unemployment and substance abuse also factor in, edging up the tensions and fueling a cycle of retaliation. Local law enforcement works hard with the resources they have, but thin budgets and huge patrol areas mean response times can lag. Residents have described evenings where minor disturbances turn into something bigger before anyone can be there to help them. This is a dreaded scenario in any community, but especially in a small town where instability hits hard, really hard. Now this one's kind of alarming, and we still got another 2 to go. The violent crime rate in Snyder is 1,258 incidents per 100,000 residents. Number 2, Donna, Texas. Another small Texas border town often overlooked, Donna packs a punch when it comes to crime. With a population of around 16,000, its violent crime rate sits far above both state and national averages, with well over 1,000 violent offenses reported for every 100,000 residents each year. Border towns face unique pressures that can intensify crime patterns, transitory population, drug trafficking spillover, and economic inequality. In Donna, these factors converge on a community that lacks the infrastructure, both social and law enforcement, to effectively absorb them. The result? A real sense among the locals that crime isn't about abstract numbers, but something that can touch anyone's life. Donna is on the outskirts of McAllen, and you usually pass through it if you're going to South Padre Island from the McAllen area. Stories from the ground reflect this. Reports of robberies near shopping centers, occasional aggravated assaults after late night gatherings, and domestic disputes that spill onto the streets. While Donna has many proud community events, they got family-oriented festivals, residents admit that peace can feel thin at times. The violent crime rate in Donna is 1,479 incidents for every 100,000 residents. All right, before we get to number 1, what were you surprised about this one? Now, I looked at all the, states for these stats, and states like California and Illinois and Michigan have incredibly violent big cities. They didn't have nearly as many small towns with violent problems like Texas and a few other ones. Kind of strange. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Gonzalez, Texas. Yep, Texas owned the bottom half of this video. If you think rural Texas is all barbecue and big Tex energy, Gonzalez will make you think again. With just under 8,000 residents, this town has shockingly high crime rates. With over 1,500 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents each year, it's one of the highest in the entire state. It's also one of the highest in the country. As a result, residents have less than a 1 in 60 chance of avoiding a violent crime in any given year, a number more typical for big cities than rural crossroads. If you're looking for Gonzalez on a map, it sits between San Antonio and Houston, a lot closer to San Antonio though. It's also not too far from Snyder, Texas, which has one of the best breweries in Texas, Shinerbach. It's a great beer, and they're not paying me to say that. But back to Gonzalez. Part of the reason Gonzalez feels so hazardous is economic. They don't have many jobs. Like many small Texas towns that once relied on agricultural and local industry, jobs have dried up faster than the rain in a drought. That kind of financial desperation often fuels drug-related offenses, assaults, and other serious crimes. Combined with under-resourced law enforcement, it creates a dangerous cocktail where minor disputes can quickly escalate into someone being beat unconscious with a shovel. Neighbors talk about what it's like to live in a place where a night out can turn sour without warning. Bar altercations, fights on Main Street, and the occasional domestic disturbance add up to create a sense that you're never quite off the clock here. For outsiders, Gonzalez might look quaint, but for residents, it can feel like every day carries the risk of something breaking bad. The violent crime rate in Gonzalez is 1,706 incidents for every 100,000 residents. That's rough. All right, that's today's video. Let me know in the comment section what you thought. Did anything surprise you? I'd love to hear it in the comment section. All right, everyone have a great day. Be nice to each other.